It's quite normal to see Formula One's rulemakers outlaw tactics from drivers and teams that they think are unsafe, unfair, or just a bit undesirable. What's slightly more unusual is for such a ban to actually help the original offender. That's the case for world champion Max Verstappen, who is no longer allowed to deploy the restart tactic he had used 3 races in a row, and in the process is being forced to stop doing something that really wasn't working. In the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and the first 2 rounds of the 2022 season, Verstappen drew alongside the lead car prior to the race resuming after a safety car. He did it on the right-hand side of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes ahead of their final lap shootout for the 2021 title and even briefly overtook him. You might remember that actually formed part of Mercedes' failed protest into the controversial outcome of that race and the championship. Then in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia this year, Verstappen positioned his car next to Charles Leclerc's ahead of the safety car restarts. Whether it was about intimidating his opponent, compromising their entry, or just trying to be as disruptive as possible, the trend was clear. This was a calculated move by Verstappen. During the Australian Grand Prix weekend though, the FIA told drivers that getting alongside another car ahead of a safety car restart would no longer be permitted. This applies once the safety car lights have been turned off and it's returning to the pits, so when the race leader is dictating the pace of the restart. FIA race director Niels Wittig issued updated event notes that included a diagram of various car positions shown here. The note stresses a part of Article 55.14 of the sporting regulations that states, in order to avoid the likelihood of accidents before the safety car returns to the pits, from the point at which the lights on the car are turned out, drivers must proceed at a pace which involves no erratic acceleration or braking, nor any manoeuvre which is likely to endanger other drivers or impede the restart. It's likely that pulling alongside another car is considered a violation of the manoeuvre part of that rule, probably because cars are still weaving to keep their tyres and brakes warm, which could be considered dangerous. As the diagram shows, the FIA has stressed that only being behind another car will be considered acceptable. If a driver still wants to move to the side, they may, but only if they are behind the rear wing of the car in front. This clamps down on a tactic that really hasn't played out in Verstappen's favour every time he's tried it. The worst was in Bahrain, where confusingly Verstappen did it on the inside on the run to the final corner. Unsurprisingly, that actually compromised his own exit, allowed Leclerc to bolt clear, and left Verstappen actually having to defend from Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. And if the move was about intimidation or disruption, then that's failed to help Verstappen either. In an incredibly high-pressure scenario, Hamilton still aced the restart in Abu Dhabi, even though he was inevitably passed a few corners later because he was on old hard tyres and Verstappen was on fresh softs. In Saudi Arabia this year, Verstappen was a bit more clever. He went to the outside of Leclerc heading into the final hairpin, forcing Leclerc into a tighter approach that stopped him opening up the corner as he would have ideally liked. But still the Ferrari driver was not fazed, squeezed Verstappen as much as possible in response, pinning him to the outside line before getting on the throttle and retaining the lead. Before we get into a bigger concern around safety car restarts and have a little look at how the FIA's post-Michael Masi era is going in 2022, we wanted to pause to ask a quick favour. If you like what we're doing, please like this video. It really helps us out when you leave us a thumbs up and a comment, and we'd love to have you around for more videos in the future. So if you're not already subscribed, click the button below to change that. Verstappen doesn't really seem to care that this tactic is no longer allowed, probably because it was achieving so little. In Australia, there were 2 safety car restarts that Verstappen had to conduct as normal, and on the second, Leclerc actually made a mistake that allowed Verstappen to attack into the first corner. So it was probably no surprise that afterwards, the only bad thing Verstappen had to say about the FIA and its restart processes was the speed of one of its safety cars. The Aston Martin Vantage made its first appearance of the season after the Mercedes-AMG GT Black Series was used in the first 2 races. Verstappen was not a fan, saying the Aston Martin was like a turtle and urging an investigation into whether it can be made faster. It was an unexpected and largely unprompted outburst from Verstappen and may seem trivial, but the Aston Martin is apparently several seconds a lap slower than the Mercedes, and that could have had a tangible impact on tyre temperatures before the restart. We saw a different manifestation of the problem with drivers trying to manage their temperatures in the same safety car period. Haas driver Mick Schumacher just about avoided rear-ending Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri during the usual fun and games of drivers accelerating then braking to keep heat in the tyres and brakes. Nobody was punished for that incident, although the stewards have urged the matter of accelerating and braking erratically to be discussed at the next driver's briefing. In their report, they noted that while they found no driver guilty of breaching the regulation, it is clear that the speed and braking capabilities of F1 cars, especially while trying to maintain required temperatures in tyres and brakes, are in tension with the 10 car length separation behind the safety car traditionally specified in the regulations. This needs to be a point of emphasis in future driver briefings to ensure the drivers collectively agree on how best to address this challenge before an unfortunate incident occurs. This message from the stewards contains a clear warning. While Schumacher and Tsunoda avoided anything nasty, the implication is that if this situation goes unaddressed, it will only be a matter of time before someone isn't so lucky. The officials were clearly hot on safety car etiquette in Australia, and an apparently stricter approach from them reflects how race control is operating at the start of the new season. After the increasingly controversial tenure of former race director Michael Masi, F1 races have been run under the watch of either Niels Wittig or Eduardo Freitas across the opening 3 races. There is a lot of scrutiny on the FIA in the wake of Masi's handling of last year's season finale and the unprecedented way he applied the rules to set up a one-lap shootout that changed the outcome of the race and the World Championship. It's clear that the new regime is very keen on following the rules as strictly as possible. Sometimes this has been entirely sensible. For example, trying to clamp down on anything that needlessly adds risk into a safety car restart, whether it's drawing alongside another car or that erratic braking and accelerating, is entirely correct. Nobody wants to see a repeat of the 2020 Tuscan Grand Prix start line crash, where a messy restart prompted a multi-car pile-up and the FIA was accused of putting the show above safety. The new race directors have also said that there will no longer be varying interpretations on track limits, and instead, the white line will govern the track edge at every corner on every circuit. That's good in principle, although the jury's still out on whether they are actually policing that in reality. Ultimately, there are still some issues with the FIA. In Australia, Wittig made a last-minute decision ahead of the final practice session to remove the new DRS zone on the approach to the high-speed S's. This was done in the name of safety, but only half the teams told the FIA it was necessary, and several drivers felt it was no worse than the DRS zones that exist in Saudi Arabia. Yet with just 20 minutes warning before FP3, teams were told the DRS zone was gone. Making a major in-weekend change is controversial in itself, let alone when you handle it like this. It partly comes down to transparency, which the officials still frustratingly lack sometimes. For example, prior to the start of the season, they issued new guidance over what drivers are required to do while racing one another. Under this new guidance, Verstappen would have been penalised for the much publicised incident he had with Hamilton at Turn 4 in Brazil last year. But this was kept private by the FIA before leaking out in the media in Bahrain. Drivers have also been quite quick to pick up on incidents where they feel officials are giving too much attention to unimportant details. Ahead of the Australian Grand Prix, drivers were reminded of the rule that stops them wearing jewellery while on track. That seemed to come from nowhere. And in a very long driver's briefing in Melbourne, they were told that they cannot wear underwear that is considered non-compliant and must make new arrangements by the Miami Grand Prix. Quite how the race director is aware what pants the likes of Hamilton or Verstappen are wearing is a mystery, as is exactly how they intend to police that. Pierre Gasly seemed particularly exasperated by this, inviting officials to look at his backside and something private on the front side if they were so keen to check him out. This is obviously a slightly silly aside to a situation in which officials are being seen to be overly strict. But whether it's about asking drivers if they race commando or telling them not to do something stupid behind a safety car, the bottom line is they're just applying the rules. Given the accusations around how the 2021 season ended, this is at least an improvement. Striking the right balance, though, is clearly still a work in progress.